What's the story, everyone? It's Aaron here from GA Fan TV. I hope you're all keeping wonderfully well. Of course, it's a couple of days since the All-Ireland football final. Dublin, of course, who ran out 5-point winners, 2-14 to 15 points. But of course, we all do know that by now, unless you have been living under a rock, which, you know, would be very surprising considering it's literally all people have talked about in the country for the past couple of days. And look, listen, there's been plenty of reaction, plenty of tweets, some positive, some negative, and some bizarre reactions to this win, in all honesty. And look, listen, we're going to dive into that today. We're going to be looking at some Twitter, social media reactions, of course, to Dublin's victory over Mayo. Let's see what some former greats have to say. Let's see what some pundits have had to say. Let's see what fans, journalists, absolutely everyone, let's see what they have to say. So let's get straight into it. So we'll start off here with the one, the only Bernard Brogan. So he says, delight for the lads and hard luck to Mayo. Special group of players, up the Dubs. He also went on to say, well done to official GA for giving us the entertainment over the last few months. A well-needed distraction for so many. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all had our doubts, didn't we, when the championship was going ahead. We all had our doubts in terms of... There were a number of doubts. I mean, there was one of the big doubts for me was the weather, because we were going into winter. It was a winter championship. How would it affect the pitches? Would games potentially have to get postponed? Like, what would happen if one game got postponed? Let's say, for example, you then would have to move the All-Ireland final to January. You'd have to have players who would have been training through Christmas. That was the big concern, in my opinion. But it didn't happen. You know, the weather was actually surprisingly fantastic. If anything, the weather has been far better during winter than it was back in January and February. Like, I remember back in January, February, some games were getting postponed because of the weather. There was storms left, right and centre. We literally have not had that problem whatsoever. And you'd be looking at that All-Ireland final. And yes, okay, you know, the floodlights were on. It was on at night time, so it did look way different to what it would normally look. But it didn't really look any different, really, to any of the other All-Ireland finals. The quality wasn't really any less. Everything was more or less the same. So weather-wise, fantastic. And obviously, with the lockdown and everything else, I think there was a lot of worries about celebrations and everything else. And again, that didn't materialise. So I think, you know, fair play to the GAA. Criticise them when you want, but I think they have done a great job in getting this All-Ireland football season and All-Ireland hurling season and the ladies' football and camogie as well, getting that up and running, so fair play to them. It hasn't been perfect, you know, under 20 and minors. I still don't understand why they were cancelled early, but look, listen, I'm not a doctor at the end of the day, so yeah, fair play to the GA for that. Tomas O'Shea here, so he says, thanks for everything all year, guys, fantastic year, tough luck to Mayo, and well done to the Dubs, especially those who reached the A strange but memorable championship. The GAA community at large should take a bow. Served an important role safely. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of touched on all that already. But yeah, you know, just kind of going back to what Tomas O'Shea said here. First of all, like, yeah, some players in that Dublin team have now won 8 All-Irelands. The likes of Stephen Cluxton, the likes of Michael Fitzsimons, James McCarthy, I think, has won 8 All-Irelands as well. Like, just incredible stuff for Dublin. Like, you know, you think that they went 16 years without winning an All-Ireland, and then, you know, some players in that team, like Stephen Cluxton, for example, would have been used to some of the failure around Dublin, he would have been there back in 2004 when Dublin lost to Westmeath. So it is quite extraordinary, really, how they managed to turn it around, and how a player like Stephen Cluxton has 8 All-Irelands. Like, there's plenty of counties who've never even won 8 All-Irelands, you know. So I think even in the Roll of Honour, Stephen Cluxton's probably in the top 6, top 7 in terms of All-Ireland winning medals, and that's just absolutely extraordinary. Michael Duigan, of course, former Offaly hurler and of course current Offaly GAA chairman, he says the absolute arrogance of Dublin present and past players saying money has made no difference is outstanding, or astounding, I should say there. Yeah, look, I mean, let's be honest though, are Dublin players really going to come out and say yes, money has made a factor? Because they don't want what they have won to be discredited. You know, there's plenty of people already that are jumping on the bandwagon, going after Dublin. Like, the Dublin players don't need to do that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they don't need to add to that narrative, in my opinion. So I think they're right to come out and not say. And plus, a lot of those Dublin players would have been there training through the difficult times, would have been through the difficult periods. The likes of Bernard Brogan, the likes of Alan Brogan. And look, listen, obviously the money debate, you know, I will make a video at some point on this channel really diving into it, because I think there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of facts, a lot of figures. There's a lot of people who just jump on the bandwagon with on this without really knowing the facts. And look, Michael Duigan obviously chairman of Offaly, he knows probably more than anyone, what it takes to, build a county to win All-Ireland championships, and to really, really be competitive. So, listen, he has made a good point there, but I do think at the same time, you're looking at a lot of the Dublin players, for example, who have been through the mud, who've gone through the mud to win this All-Ireland. I don't think they're going to come out and really add to this narrative, in all honesty. So this was a tweet, of course, from Des Cahill, and I'm sure most people seen this already. So he says, ahead of the Sunday game, I asked Croke Park Stadium director Peter McKenna if there were any incidents or stories from the All-Ireland final between Dublin and Mayo. This was his reply. He said, hi Des, a small bit for the show this evening. The Dublin team cleared up the dressing room before they left last night. This has never happened before. Very thoughtful to the cleaners and others who were waiting to turn it around for today. Humility is the mark of great champions. Best, Peter. And of course, Colin Parkinson, of course, always a man for a few controversial tweets and moments. He says, this old nonsense. Very disappointing how Peter McKenna forgot that Stephen Cluxton swept and mopped it last year. Well, look, listen, maybe Peter McKenna wasn't working there last year. You just don't know, and maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I honestly do not know. I don't even know who Peter McKenna is. But yeah, look, listen, I'm sure they are not the only ones that have cleaned the dressing room after full time. I'm sure other counties have done it on numerous occasions. I'm sure it probably happens on a regular basis. Obviously, this was what Des put up. This was his response. We can only kind of go off what each one of them have said. I think everyone who's chosen to have a go at the Dubs for this is kind of quite bizarre in many ways. But I do also think at the same time that obviously it isn't the first time this has happened before. Like, let's be honest. I'm sure other county teams have cleaned the dressing room after the game. So maybe spinning the narrative that Dublin are the only ones to ever do it is a little bit out of touch, in my opinion. And it probably rubs salt in the wounds of all the other county fans and players who've seen that, considering how dominant Dublin really, really are at the moment. So this was from Cahar O'Kane. He says, Cillian O'Connor, Ryan O'Donoghue and Oisin Mullen ran Mayo's attack in the first half with 40 possessions between them. Dublin's changes took all three completely out of the game after half time. O'Donoghue touched the ball just twice in the second half. Yeah, he was the danger man in that game. Like, Ryan O'Donoghue, he was man of the match up until the second half, in my opinion. In the first half, he was absolutely outstanding. Dublin really couldn't get the grips on him at all. Like, he just kept driving through Dublin's full-back line and half-back line. The likes of John Small and Davy Byrne were struggling, and there were a couple of opportunities where it looked like he was going to run through and get a goal, or at least get a goal chance. I think in the end, Dublin did a great job in the second half especially. They really tightened up at the back, and they really understood the threat that Ryan O'Donoghue was opposing to this Dublin side. Oisin Mullen, one of the players of the season without doubt. Definitely a contender for an all-star in my opinion. And obviously Cillian O'Connor, of course, probably the best footballer in the country at the moment. I think it's tied between him and Brian Fenton for footballer of the year, but of course I will have a separate video discussing all that at a later point, so we will of course talk about that on another occasion. This is from Alan Brogan. He says, a slightly disappointing anti-Dublin sentiment out there from some quarters this morning. Guess that comes with a bit of success. Yeah, look, listen, and it was always going to happen, let's be honest. If Dublin had won this game by a point, if Dublin had won this game on penalties, it would have been the exact same. It absolutely didn't matter what way Dublin won this game. There was always going to be numerous people who were going to come out and try and discredit Dublin's success. And look, listen, you can understand the frustration from a lot of fans and pundits and journalists from a lot of other counties, because obviously, it would be, I can imagine myself, like if I seen Kerry win 6 All-Irelands in a row and 7 in the last 8 years, of course I would be very, very frustrated. And there would probably be a part of me that would maybe feel a lot of resentment towards Kerry. There would be a lot of resentment towards, I don't know, maybe if Tyrone done it, or whoever. It doesn't necessarily make a difference who it is. So I think there's a lot of frustration from fans, and they obviously want to see other counties be up there. They want to see other counties be successful. And I do also think that this year, realistically, there was a lot of counties that we all had on the list to challenge Dublin. Galway, Kerry, Donegal, Tyrone. I think people would have probably had them as the top 5 in the country going into the All-Ireland football season. Now obviously Donegal played Tyrone, so that reduced one of them at least. But the likes of Galway, the likes of Kerry and Donegal all did not show up in the All-Ireland Football Championship, and I think that's probably added to the frustration as well from lots of people all around the country, in my opinion. Joe Brolly, so he's always a man to have a go at Mayo after an All-Ireland football final loss. So a couple of tweets from him. He said Mayo should go and win this now, and then he followed up by saying, but they won't. He also did release an article out on the Irish Independent. He said Dublin are all the things that are good about life and sport. Mayo are doomed until their celebrity culture is banished. I have to disagree with Joe, in all honesty. I do think that maybe there is a player power culture issue or whatever within Mayo. I do think though that I think that was maybe in previous years. I don't know if that's there now, and obviously I don't know any of the Mayo players. I haven't been there, so I can't really say too much about it in my honest opinion. But the fact that there are new players coming through the team does for me suggest that that is not the case. I think in previous years you might have had players like Seamie O'Shea, for example, who wasn't probably performing to the best degree for Mayo, or you might have had other players in that Mayo team who really weren't pulling their weight and were still getting in the side, and he did question like how is that happening. But I do think this year, through the likes of Ryan O'Donoghue, through the likes of Owen McLaughlin and Oisin Mullen and Mark Moran previously in the year as well, who've all come into the team, I think the suggestions that there's a celebrity culture as such, I don't know if that's there, in all honesty. And I do think it's very harsh to blame that on Mayo, because I think, you know, in my opinion, like I said before, coming into the All-Ireland Football Championship, I didn't even have them in the top 5 in the country. Like, it was Dublin, Kerry, Donegal, Tyrone, you know, and Galway. They would have been the top 5 before a ball was kicked in the All-Ireland Football Championship. And Mayo have done absolutely brilliantly to win the Connacht Championship, and they done what they should have done. They beat the teams that they should have beat. So I think to really criticise them for a 5-point loss against Dublin, when realistically they done nothing wrong, in my opinion. They done absolutely nothing wrong. It was the difference for me was the players that Dublin brought off the bench. Paul Mannion, who else did they bring on? Paul Mannion, Brian Howard coming off, Colin Basquel. You also had Cormac Costello, who didn't even kick a point, like he came on late on. But you've other players in that team like Michael Darragh Macaulay, Kevin McManaman, who I don't even think they got a game this year. And that just goes to show the amount of options that Dublin have. Mayo don't have that right now, but maybe in a couple of years, you know, players like Darren McHale, for example, Conal Dempsey, young players at the moment coming through, they could be, you know, players who could potentially break through on this Mayo side and at least offer an option coming off the bench. Alan Brogan here, so just following up with what I said, really. Also, I'm sure Kevin McManaman, Michael Darragh Macaulay, Paddy Andrews and Keane O'Sullivan played a huge role in yesterday's win despite not getting on the field. And yeah, you know, you forget Paddy Andrews, of course, you know, one of the top forwards for Dublin down the years, probably doesn't always get the credit he deserves. I would suspect that maybe one or two of those players will probably call it a day, maybe in the coming weeks, maybe in January or so. You might see one or two of them potentially retire, if not even all of them, possibly. But I think, yeah, they've been fantastic servants to Dublin down the years. And just like Bernard Brogan last year, who didn't get he didn't even play in the All-Ireland Football Championship last year, from what I remember. He didn't play in any of the finals anyway. But without doubt, like his experience in the dressing room, and you know, everything else that he brings to the table, I'm sure keeping players on their toes, without doubt, you know, he definitely made a massive difference, and I'm sure these four lads without doubt made a huge difference as well. Jack Mattinsons, can't really say that name, I think I've butchered that, but sure, what can you do? He says the fact that a county like Mayo can compete with Dublin the way they do is testament to the commitment of Mayo footballers. Given the population and financial differences, it's like expecting Estonia to beat Germany in a World Cup final. Yeah, look, listen, I don't always agree with the population debate, in my opinion, because I think, yes, Dublin do have massive population, and yes, urbanisation, essentially like what Pat Gilroy was talking about on the Sunday game, is a thing, because, you know, you have families who move down from the country to move to Dublin for work, and obviously, you know, they have kids, and those kids are from Dublin and play for Dublin. You know, that's kind of how it works a lot of the time. But I don't always agree with the population. Like, there are a lot of you know, competitive sports in Dublin for Gaelic footballers to compete with. You have hurling, you have soccer, you have rugby, who took off massively, of course, in the mid 2000s. Mixed martial arts is massively on the up at the moment as well. And look, listen, that's not to say it's like that in those other counties, but I never really hear of good rugby players from Mayo. I never really hear of good hurlers. You know, I feel like Gaelic football is absolutely nailed on to be number one in Mayo, whereas in Dublin, it's kind of up in the air. You could argue the other sports are ahead of Gaelic football. It's a hard one to know in all honesty, but I don't always agree with the population debate. Look at, like, if you're going to use countries with population, why aren't China winning the World Cup year after year, year after year? Do you know what I mean? Like, so can't always use the population debate. Yes, it is something worth considering, but I don't always agree that population is the reason for Dublin's success. And of course, just to finish things up, we'll have the last but not least here, Paddy Desmond. So important the GAA changed the championship format as soon as possible. The final was the only game worth getting excited about as a Dubs supporter, and was amazing. We need a championship where Dublin play Kerry, Donegal, Tyrone, Mayo, etc. every year. I agree with him to a certain extent, and I also disagree with him. I agree with him because, yeah, the Mayo game was the only game as a Dublin fan to be excited about. But that was not Dublin's fault, in my opinion. As I said before, if Donegal or Tyrone were in that semi-final, I think it would have been exciting, and I think they would have been closer. I think Dublin still would have won, and probably still would have won by 4 or 5 points. But I don't think it was an absolute whitewash what it was like against Cavan. And that's not to take anything away from a team like Cavan, but I do think they massively overachieved in winning the Ulster Football Championship. Like, well deserved, 110%, but I do think 9 times out of 10, if that Ulster Championship final was played again, I think Donegal would have won it, in my opinion. So yeah, look, listen, Dublin playing Kerry, Donegal, Tyrone, Mayo, etc. every year, yeah, fair enough, but like, obviously, what happens if Dublin lose to Kerry or something like that and then win the All-Ireland? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it really fair if teams start losing games and then still go on to win All-Irelands? I agree, you know, you have your back door, so you have your second chance. But yeah, it's an interesting one. We all want to see that, obviously, and maybe like a third structure, like what they have similar to in hurling, could work. But I do think at the same time, there's bigger things to address first, rather than the championship structure, and that's really resources and obviously trying to get these other counties up to the same level. And I think a lot of these counties need to look at themselves as well, because, you know, why are Kerry losing to a very young, inexperienced Cork team? Why are Donegal losing in the exact same circumstances to you know, Cavan, you know, Galway? Why were they so poor after the lockdown? Like, a lot of these counties need to look at themselves, in my opinion, rather than continuously pointing the blame. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. The football team of the year will be out, if not tomorrow, the next day. And the hurling team of the year will follow suit as well. And there will be a number of videos that will still drop out. I'm thinking of putting together football power rankings, hurling power rankings, and yeah, just a lot of other content coming out over the Christmas and over January. And of course, the structure was announced for the National Football League 2021, so I'll probably make a video on that tomorrow maybe, or in the coming days. So yeah, look, listen, do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. My name is Aaron, and I'll see you in the next one.